I think that's the last bit of the sacred music. Well, thank you all for coming outside on this lovely day. I'm glad that we were able to shift the auditorium so that you can all sit in the sun. This is the 10th anniversary of Poetry on the Patio, and only once in 10 years have we had to go inside, and I'm very proud of that. I do wish it was 10 degrees warmer. However, Julie, thank you again. Julie Kimlinger has set up every single one of these. By the end of today, over 110 different people from the St. Thomas community have gotten up here to read poetry, and I think that is really terrific, so thank Julie for that. Now, I'd like to ask how many people here in this group have read before at Poetry on the Patio? Raise your hands. Thank you very much. Nice to see you all again. We've typically not asked people to come back more than once. Except for me. But we do have a couple who have read more than once. Dr. Tom Hodgson is one. He's a very good reader. And I've got to read every single time. This is one of the highlights of my year. It comes at the end of National Poetry Month, partly because of weather, and we want to be outside, so we move it as far off as possible. National Poetry Month has become a really big thing. As you maybe know, we've had several events in the library in the last couple of weeks. Kirsten Durking, who actually used to work for us and did organize the very first Poetry on the Patio, came back to read from her new book of poetry, which is absolutely beautiful. And then last week there was an Emily Dickinson marathon in which every one of her poems were read. It took many, 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 many hours in the library. But I spoke to two poets that day, and they were like exhausted after National Poetry Month. I think that's kind of funny, but also neat. They'd been to readings every single day, and sometimes more than once a day, and they both read their own poems and everything. So I think that's pretty cool. That's a good problem to have, tired out by poetry. It is our chance. I love this day because it is our chance as lay people, not as poets and not as experts or anything, but as just people who like poetry, to get up and read something and that has meaning for us. So I'm very thankful that you who are reading today and who have read in the past have shared in this experience with us. One of the things we've learned as we've recruited and solicited people all year round, which is about what it takes to read, is that people are sort of intimidated by poetry, and they think you have to understand it all, or you have to have some special gift at reading or something, and I don't think that's true at all. And I think that this project has proven that that's not true. I wanted to read something, just a couple lines from the poet Edward Hirsch's book, How to Read a Poem and Fall in Love with Poetry. It's a really nice book. And in this section, which he has titled, Mere Air, These Words, But Delicious to Hear, he writes a little bit about the pleasures of reading poetry. And so I'm quoting from his book now. The sound of the words is the first primitive pleasure in poetry. In poetry, Wallace Stevens asserted, you must love the words, the ideas and images and rhythms with all your capacity to love anything at all. Stevens lists the love of the words as the first condition of a capacity to love anything in poetry at all, because it is the words that make things happen. There are times when I read a poem and can feel the syllables coming alive in my mouth. The letters enunciated in the syllables coming together as words, the words forming into a phrase, the phrase finding a rhythm in the line, in the lines, in the shape of the words crossing the lines into a sentence, into sentences. I feel the words creating a rhythm, a music, a spell, a mood, a shape, a form. I hear the words coming off the page into my own mouth, in transit, in action. I generate, I recreate, the words incantatory, the words liberated and self-reflexive, words rising from the body, out of the body, an act of language paying attention to itself, an act of the mind. So that is what we celebrate today. If you've never done this before, I hope you have a program we don't introduce you, the readers. You introduce yourselves. Just follow the program. After a respectful pause, I guess you could say, following the reader before you just rise, come up here, tell us who you are, and maybe something about the poem that makes it special to you. And thank you once again for coming. I am going to read a poem that I'm actually reading it off of a photocopy from the New Yorker magazine. I found this poem in, it looks like it was August of 1990, and I cannot believe I hung on to this piece of paper for 18 years, and I've lost so many other things. It is called Even If You Weren't My Father. I have thought of this poem a lot in the last few weeks since the death of my own father on March 26th. This is by the Italian poet Camillo Sbarbaro. He wrote, it looks like in the first half of the 20th century, and died in 1967. Even if you weren't my father. Father, even if you weren't my father, were you an utter stranger? For your own self, I'd love you. Remembering how you saw one winter morning the first violet on the wall across the way, and with what joy you shared the revelation. Then, hoisting the ladder to your shoulder, out you went and propped it to the wall. We, your children, stood watching at the window. And I remember how, another time, you chased my little sister through the house. Pig-headedly she'd done I know not what. But when she run to the earth, shrieked out in fear, your heart misgave you, for you saw yourself hunt down your helpless child. Relenting then, you took her into your arms in all her terror, caressing her enclosed in your embrace, as in some shelter from that brute who'd been one moment since yourself. Father, even if you were not my father, were you some utter stranger? For your innocence, your artless tender heart, I would above all men so love you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Denise Dieffenbach, and I'm one of those people who is very intimidated by this, so be kind. As you know, our community has had a very challenging year. I work in multicultural student services here at St. Thomas, so we've had a really challenging year. And so as I thought about a poem to share, I thought of one of my most favorites poets is Maya Angelou. And so I selected And Still I Rise because I think for myself personally, sometimes you have to constantly remind yourself that we all need to rise above the challenges that we're faced on a day-to-day basis, whether they be regarding race or gender or just the myriad of things that we're all challenged with from time to time. So I hope that this will inspire you to dig deep in your faith and know that you can rise above it. Still I rise. You may write me down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may trod me in the very dirt, but still, like dust, I'll rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk like I've got oil wells pumping in my living room? Just like moons and like suns, with the certainty of tides, just like hopes springing high, still I'll rise. Did you want to see me broken, bowed head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by my soulful cries? Does my hauntingness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I've got gold mines digging in my own backyard. You may shoot me with your words, you may cut me with your eyes, you may kill me with your hatefulness, but still, like air, I'll rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I've got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. Up from a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm a black ocean leaping and wide, welling and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into a daybreak that's wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise. Thank you. I also want to just apologize in advance that I'm supposed to be in 3 places at the same time, so I really want to stay, but I have to leave, so thank you.
I have to admit, when I got the email to read, I was really excited. My parents are both English majors. My father taught English at Southwest High School, and he led the poetry magazine back in the 1970s. So he had poetry readings at my house on a regular basis, and this sort of brought some of that back. I tried to find a poem that was perfect for this time. You know, I think about spring and things starting over again, things that are clean, and it took a while to find the right poem. And actually, the day that I got the reminder from Julie that I needed the author and the title, I still hadn't found the right one. And I just happened to be over in Irish studies for another reason that had to do with art. I work in the art history department, and I was talking to Jim Rogers, and I didn't know him that well. I still don't. And I said, "You don't happen to have a poem about water, do you?" I didn't realize that he wrote poetry. And he kind of smiled, and he said, "I think I might." And then he lent me this little book that includes poems all by Jim. And so I'm going to read 2 of them today. The first is Lost Wax of Geology. I lug stones and load the car trunk. Springs drop low under the weight. Lifted rocks show the soil here holds. A trace of clay, it shapes the stone's nests. Lost wax, cast by geology. Absence makes a fresh and secret socket. Brown and black, domes etched by dark, slow probings of earthworms or ants' nests, busy with eggs and drones teeming like a bloodstream. And then in early spring, this is about water. This is about a pond. Pond water remembers. It welcomes back Canada's Koontz, the redwings, and their trill. It waits for the peepers in hope. It remembers the day each year when nothing remains to melt, remembers the half-life of ice splintering into honeycombs. Pond water remembers the shape of the shore, remembers to rise into the reeds. It knows that last year's green will be captured by mud and finds comfort in the triumph of rot. Pond water remembers the rain and is grateful when it falls, grateful like a runner drinking deep at the end of a race. Pond water surrenders to ripples, opens its palms to feel the winds and the breeze, the kisses of dragonflies. So.
My name is Kory Kutz, and I'm a senior here at St. Thomas. I'm a double major in philosophy and Catholic studies and a minor in theology, and I've been working at the library for the last 2 years, so I've embraced the culture and I've become part of the committee for the future of the library. And the poem that I chose today was by Gerard Manley Hopkins. He's a Jesuit from Canada, and every time I read this poem, it inspires me to be a better Catholic. The reason why I say that is that I think one of the problems that we have, and it's just spewed all over campus, is that we just don't embrace the beauty of every day. And we don't see God's grandeur in everything around us and every person that comes into our contact. And I think if we can embrace that, there's so much more community life that we can really accomplish, and there's going to be such more positive energy here at St. Thomas. I just felt like I had to read it. The world is charged with the grandeur of God. It will flame out like shining from shook soil. It gathers to a greatness like the ooze of oil, crushed. Why do men then now not wreck his rod? Generations have trod, have trod, have trod, and all is seared with trade, bleared, smeared with toil, and wears man's smudge and shares man's smell. The soil is bare now, nor can foot feel being shod. And for all this, nature is never spent. Their lives, the dearest freshness, deep down things. And though the last lights off the black west went, oh, morning, at the brown brink eastward springs, because the Holy Ghost over the bent world broods with warm breast and with bright wings.
Good afternoon. I am Laurence Potter, and I live in 104 Aquinas Hall. It's where you can find me most of the time. I am happy to accept the invitation from Julie. She wrote me last year, and my schedule just would not permit, and I promised her that if I did nothing in 2008, I would read this year. My background, I'm a trained librarian and literary critic. And so I decided that I would choose a poem by someone I consider to be a homegirl, not necessarily being born in the same place, but having traveled in similar pathways. Margaret Walker Alexander, many of you may know her for her famous Civil War novel Jubilee, but was also a poet. She was born in Birmingham, Alabama. I attended an undergraduate school right down the street in Tuscaloosa. Walker went to school at New Orleans University, which is now Dillard, and I was born there. And then she ended her career in Jackson, Mississippi, where my parents migrated to Jackson, where I finished high school. And so there's some travel space. But the poem that I chose is entitled For My People. It was written in 1942. And it deals with the experiences of a certain composite of the American population, Black Americans, but I think it speaks even more loudly as we listen to the debates across the presidential landscape of this country, healthcare, warfare, and the whole 9 yards. For my people, everywhere singing their slave songs repeatedly, their dirges and their ditties and their blues and jubilees, praying their prayers nightly to an unknown God, bending their knees humbly to an unseen power. For my people, lending their strength to the years, to the gone years, and the now years, and the maybe years. Washing, ironing, cooking, scrubbing, sewing, mending, plowing, hoeing, digging, planting, pruning, patching, dragging along, never gaining, never reaping, never knowing, and never understanding. For my playmates in the clay and the dust and the sand of Alabama backyards, playing baptizing and preaching and doctor and jail and soldier and school and mama and cooking and playhouse and concert and store and hair and Miss Coombe and company. For the cramped, bewildered years we went to school to learn, to know the reasons why, and the answers to, and the people who, and the places where, and the days when, in memory of the bitter hours when we discovered we were black and poor and small and different, and nobody cared, and nobody wondered, and nobody understood. For the boys and girls who grew in spite of these things to be man and woman, to laugh and dance and sing and play and drink their wine in religion and success, to marry their playmates and bear children and then die of consumption and anemia and lynching. For my people thronging 47th Street in Chicago and Lenox Avenue in New York and Rampart Street in New Orleans, lost, disinherited, dispossessed, and happy people filling the cabarets and taverns and other people's pockets needing bread and shoes and milk and land and money and something all our own. For my people walking blindly, spreading joy, losing time, being lazy, sleeping when hungry, shouting when burdened, drinking when hopeless, tied and shackled, entangled among ourselves by the unseen creatures who tower over us omnisciently and laugh. For my people blundering and groping and floundering in the darks of churches and schools and clubs and societies, associations and councils and committees and conventions, distressed and disturbed and deceived and devoured by money-hungry, glory-craving leeches, preyed on by facile force of state and fad and novelty, by false prophet and holy believer. For my people standing, trying to fashion a better way from confusion, from hypocrisy and misunderstanding, trying to fashion a world that will hold all the people, all the faces, all the Dams and Eves and their countless generations. Let a new earth rise, let another world be born, let a bloody peace be written in the sky, let a second generation full of courage issue forth, let a people loving freedom come to growth. Let a beauty full of healing and a strength of final clenching by the pulsing in our spirits and our bloods. Let the martial songs be written, let the dirges disappear, let a race of men and women now rise and take control.
Hello, I'm Dejan Tesfagiorgis. I'm a student here, St. Thomas, senior, majoring in entrepreneurship and music. And poem I'm reading today is We Wear the Mask by Laurence Dunbar. And this poem has been resonating in my head since in 10th grade we did like a poetry unit, film and poetry unit. And I guess this one I could say goes out to Mr. Harris from Memorial High School in Madison, Wisconsin. And we wear the mask. It's like, you ever run into someone, they say, hi, how you doing? Fine, how are you? It's like an automatic reaction, even though something else can be on your mind. You know, it's just like these sort of casual encounters. You have sort of a mask on of casualness. Just try to, you got to keep some skeletons to yourself. You can't just put it all out there like the National Enquirer. So I'm just going to start out and just go into it. 1895, we wear the mask. We wear the mask that grins and lies. It hides our cheeks and shades our eyes. This debt we pay to human guile. With torn and bleeding hearts we smile, and mouth with myriad subtleties. Why should the world be overwise in counting all our tears and sighs? Nay, let them only see us while we wear the mask. We smile, but O great Christ, our cries to thee from tortured souls arise. We sing, but oh the clay is vile, beneath our feet and long the mile. But let the word dream otherwise, we wear the mask.
Hi, I'm Lisa Burke. I work in the College of Business as the director of Webb initiatives, and I was asked to read in 2001 and was embarrassed at the time that I didn't read poetry very much, not only out loud, but to myself. And as an avid reader, I kind of question why is it that I've been ignoring poetry for so long. So I promptly started to look around for poets that I really wanted to read, and one of them that I found was Jane Kenyon. And this poem has actually been hanging on my bulletin board since 2001 and has moved with me in 5 different office moves. So I'm going to read that in a minute. Just wanted to talk a little bit about Jane Kenyon, and I'm actually going to read another short poem by her. Jane Kenyon grew up in the Midwest. She went to the University of Michigan, where she met her husband, the poet Donald Hall. She published 4 collections of poetry during her lifetime, and I think most of those were published by Grey Wolf Press here in St. Paul. She died at age 47 in 1995 from leukemia, And at that time, she was New Hampshire's poet laureate. She and Donald Hall lived in New Hampshire on a farm that had been in his family for many years, and that was a perfect place for her to write poetry. She said, "For me, poetry comes out of silence, and I can have silence here." Her poetry is really simple and lovely. She writes a lot about domestic life and rural life, and exploration of spirituality, as well as her struggles with depression. She was bipolar depressed, and just has some really intelligent and lovely poems. So the first poem I'm going to read is a short poem, What Came to Me, and then the second is Happiness. What came to me. I took the last dusty piece of china out of the barrel. It was your gravy boat, with a hard brown drop of gravy still on the porcelain lip. I grieved for you then as I never had before. And happiness. There's just no accounting for happiness, or the way it turns up like a prodigal who comes back to the dust at your feet, having squandered a fortune far away. And how can you not forgive? You make a feast in honor of what was lost, and take from its place the finest garment, which you saved for an occasion you could not imagine, and you weep night and day to know that you were not abandoned, that happiness saved its most extreme form for you alone. No, happiness is the uncle you never knew about, who flies a single-engine plane onto the grassy landing strip, hitchhikes into town, and inquires at every door until he finds you, asleep, mid-afternoon, as you so often are during the unmerciful hours of your despair. It comes to the monk in his cell. It comes to the woman sweeping the street with a birch broom, to the child whose mother has passed out from drink. It comes to the lover, to the dog chewing a sock, to the pusher, to the basket maker, and to the clerk stacking cans of carrots in the night. It even comes to the boulder, in the perpetual shade of pine barrens, to rain falling on the open sea, to the wine glass, weary of holding wine.
Let me just say first, this is wonderful. Thank you, Dan and Julie. My name is Kathleen Keller, and I work at the Center for Catholic Studies. Let's see if I can lower this. And what Julie didn't know when she asked me to read was that I recently will be graduating with an MFA in poetry from Hamline University. So, and she said, you can't read your own stuff. My first poem is from a fellow graduate, though, Ann Piper. And though we did not have any classes together, I was really utterly impressed when I heard Ann read recently by her honesty, her humor, and her vulnerability. The first poem of gratitude upon ceasing my godlike behavior. Thank you for summer and the loose jointed way I walk when it's hot. I know it's not becoming. Thanks for the cat pressing his paw over ants in the patio cracks. The former me would stop him. Thanks for the way I slept last night, deep and long, uncaring. And thank you for the fire we'll build tonight. It will singe moths and mosquitoes. This world is your doing. And finally, I will not apologize for letting it be done. The next two poems are in honor of my upcoming move to London, where my husband just began his new job. These two poems are each titled In a Station of the Metro, and they're anthologized in a new book called Conversation Pieces, Poems That Talk to Other Poems. The first is the well-known poem by Ezra Pound, and the second is a response by Daniel Hall. In a Station of the Metro. The apparition of these faces in the crowd, petals on a wet black bough. In a station of the metro, some kind of trouble up the line somewhere, as yet unannounced, only its subtlest effects having arrived premonitory. Absence gathers in the bedrock hush of a hall accustomed to an intermittent uproar. Utterly lost, a starling blunders from perch to perch, as if learning to fly, while we sit stiller and stiller, rehearsing our eventual departures. This hardly counts as travel, though, this hive-like circulation, this confluence and divergence of desires. The look we wear, most of us, because of the one woman who sits alone weeping, loudly, messily, as if she would never stop, as if she had always been crying. The look we wear says, I am not even here. Against the wall stand 3 European boys with heavy packs. One, an Italian, is talking with obvious excitement. His companions listen, each wearing his northern skepticism like an elegant scarf. Behind their eyes, a cold swarm of Aristotle and Hegel, a string theory of critical theories in infinite regression, teeming, ramifying. They glance furtively side to side, awaiting the inevitable opportunity. We wait. The companions wait. Only the starling, the weeping woman, and the Italian boy are not waiting, but plunging recklessly ahead, having now so little choice. The rails cannot believe their luck as their day-long headache begins to ease, tentatively, miraculously. The tunnel blackens and deepens, or something worse than deepening, for depth implies a limit. Shifting from English to French and back, the boy now and then slips in a word of Italian in his excitement, then blushingly removes it. The sobbing is a bellows, ripping at the air, in and out. Scored above it, a weak falsetto wail. The vowel is Russian, maybe, or Irish, the inflection untranslatable. Her hair hangs straight and lusterless, and her eyes are so swollen with tears she looks like the victim of a beating, a fistful of crumpled papers and a photograph. The boy's companions are no longer listening. They've demolished his argument, each in his own mind, and are ready to have at him as soon as he is done. Still virtual, hypothetical, the train is accumulating mass in some other realm, but the rails are singing in an ecstasy of relief. On the stairs, one of a pair of cops points a stick in the direction of the woman. They stand on spread legs, idly wondering whether to move, whether to bother. And then the mildest runner of pain shoots through the rails, gratifyingly familiar, and builds to an excruciating crescendo. In mid-thought, lips parted, the boy looks away from his friends. Everyone looks up, squinting toward the light and ruckus. Everyone but the woman, who folds in around herself, and then flings her arms outward, scattering the pages and the photograph, which in the tumult of arrival fly everywhere. The pavement, the train, the bird, the surging crowd. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Webb, and I work in the Dean of Students office here. And the poem that I'm going to read is called The Invitation, and it's written by Oriah Mountain Dreamer. I don't know if that's her real name, but I think it's beautiful. And the reason I chose to read it is because every time I read it, it reminds me to be fully present in life and to really be able to sit with the pain, the joy, the sorrow, and the beauty of life and embrace the inner silence we have and the noise of the world around us. So, read this for you. It doesn't interest me what you do for a living. I want to know what you ache for, and if you dare to dream of meeting your heart's longing. It doesn't interest me how old you are. I want to know if you will risk looking like a fool for love, for your dream, for the adventure of being alive. It doesn't interest me what planets are squaring your moon. I want to know if you have touched the center of your own sorrow, if you have been opened by life's betrayals, or have become shriveled and closed from fear of further pain. I want to know if you can sit with pain, mine or your own, without moving to hide it, or fade it, or fix it. I want to know if you can be with joy, mine or your own, if you can dance with wildness and let the ecstasy fill you to the tips of your fingers and toes, without cautioning us to be realistic, to be careful, to remember the limitations of being human. It doesn't interest me if the story you are telling me is true. I want to know if you can disappoint another to be true to yourself. If you can bear the accusation of betrayal and not betray your own soul. If you can be faithless and therefore trustworthy. I want to know if you can see beauty, even when it's not pretty, every day. And if you can source your own life from its presence. I want to know if you can live with failure, yours and mine, and still stand at the edge of the lake and shout to the silver of the full moon, yes. It doesn't interest me to know where you live or how much money you have. I want to know if you can get up after the night of grief and despair, weary and bruised to the bone, and do what needs to be done to feed the children. It doesn't interest me who you know or how you came to be here. I want to know if you will stand in the center of the fire with me and not shrink back. It doesn't interest me where or what or with whom you have studied. I want to know what sustains you from the inside when all else falls away. I want to know if you can be alone with yourself and if you truly like the company you keep in the empty moments.
Hello, my name is Sherrie Mays and I work in the Office of Academic Affairs. I'll be reading a poem by Shannon, who's one of our many wonderful writers right here in the Twin Cities. And I'd like to encourage everyone to consider reading local poets. And I do believe that being lesser known does not necessarily equate to having less talent or having less to say. Shannon's been writing and publishing in journals and magazines for many years. And the poem that I'm going to read, Scattering Dreams, comes from her first collection, Singing the Bones Together, published in 2003. In this poem, we will meet a young girl who found freedom through the written word. Those of us who are drawn to language and find that we only discover our deeply held secrets and longings when we put words to the page understand what a profound and exhilarating experience this is. Imagine just how much more powerful and profound and exhilarating this practice would be if you were held in captivity and if you were owned by someone who desperately wanted to keep not just your body in bondage, but your mind, your spirit, and your soul as well. Again, it's called Scattering Dreams by Shannon. Dear Mama, I am sitting under the umbrella tree with paper and pencil stub. Since I have learned to write, angels crowd my shoulders like Missy's wedding shawl. Mama, when I'm writing, flight enters my bones. I'm planning the note for our crossing over to Jordan. I suspect we will look into the river, see our faces, see our hands wavering on the water, even see our broad feet, and claim ourselves. This body belongs to me. These are my ample arms, my knobby knees, my knotted hair. Mama, I come here on Sundays at sunrise practicing the plan. First, I write my name, Willa May. Then I write free. Then I seed my name. I say Willa May, free. To leaves, to acorns, to butterflies staring on the grass blades. The soil under my heels starts whispering, nudging me to stand, walk, get moving. Seems like I can't stay on the ground. Those angels swooping around my pencil are the same ones fluttering about my knees, scattering dreams everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherrie, and everybody for reading. You all picked wonderful poems and read beautifully. Almost every year, I think that was the best year we've ever had, and this year is no exception. So I wanted to mention two more things. We are putting together a list of all the poems that have ever been read at Poetry on the Patio. We'll make that available on the website. And since we've taped every single one, we're going to, over the next couple of months, with the help of the experts over in Webb and Media Services, put together a little compilation video as well. So you may see yourself there someday. Thanks again for coming. Have a cup of coffee and a piece of cake.